Hello, this is Jack Sheffield, Jack the Exam Guy again. We're going to be talking about the manuals, the reference manuals for the general, builder, and residential contractors exams. This is the trade portion of the exam. Hopefully you've passed the business already and now you're ready for the trade portion of the exam. The references are exactly the same for the general, the builder, and the residential. Okay. Now, the first step in answering a lookup question, what we call a lookup question, this is not a math question, we're looking through the book to see how we're going to find it in the manual, is knowing which manual to use, obviously, right? Now, this overview is going to give you a really good background on which manual you're going to try to go to. Okay, so here we go. Here they are. We have Florida Building Code Building. We have Florida Building Code Residential. We have Florida Building Code Accessibility. We have Florida Building Code Energy Conservation and Florida Building Code Existing Buildings. Now, you can pause this video at any time. I'm going to go a little bit fast on going through the manuals a little bit. If you need to pause it and make sure that you've got all these manuals, this is a good time to make sure that you've got all the manuals that you need to take into the exam and the other ones to study with as well. We have principles and practices of commercial construction, which now you can take into the exam, thank goodness. We have energy efficient building construction in Florida. We have building component safety information, which is all about trusses. We have the 1926 OSHA. Okay, this is called the Code of Federal Regulations, 29 CFR. Okay, Code of Federal, it's the OSHA. We call it the OSHA manual. And we have the Florida Contractors Manual. You pass the business exam, you got a little background on this one already, and also on the AIA documents, the 201, the 401, and the 701. These are the manuals that you can take into the exam. Okay? Now we're going to look at the manuals that you cannot take into the exam. This is the Design and Control of Concrete Mixtures. Here's our 16th edition. Here's our 17th edition. You can only bring one in. I don't think it really matters. I don't think if you go back to 15, 14, or 13, it's going to matter. Okay, and that pretty much is the same for any of these manuals, and they generally won't give you an issue, a problem about bringing in an older edition. Okay, and here's your gypsum book, application of gypsum products. All right, these are ones, once again, you cannot take in, so this is a small one. You can read the whole thing. Um, Placing reinforcement bars, I'll be able to tell you a few things out of that manual that you're going to need to know. And the Walker's Building Estimators Reference Book. I've got the 31st edition up there. That's the one I've been generally using. If you've got the 32nd or the 29th or the 27th or 28th or any of them, it doesn't really matter. The test questions many of them were written years ago out of the older manuals, and so I think we're going to be good pretty much regardless of whatever edition you have. And then you have the Builder's Guide to Accounting. Okay, you won't be using this very much except for that formula on page 24. All right, so but remember, these manuals are suggested study, but they're not allowed into the exam. Okay, it's very important for you to know. Now, I do have a list of important concepts that come out of each one of these manuals, and I also have videos that take you through these manuals. So I suggest that you watch them. I suggest that you take the practice exams. I suggest that you try to study these lists of important concepts that come out of these manuals, and that's going to definitely help you succeed in this exam the first time. Okay, so let's go manual by manual. We're talking about here, this slide, we're talking about the Florida Building Code Building and the Florida Building Code Residential. When you're talking about code questions, you have to realize that code means it's a law. You gotta do it a certain way. So you're gonna see words like shall, you're gonna see words like must, you're gonna see minimums and maximums, all right? So just be aware of how, just kind of think about how that question is going to be structured, okay? You know, the maximum allowable air infiltration of a window is 0.3 CFMs per square foot. A minimum of R19 shall be installed in a ceiling. These types of things, okay? Both of these manuals have good indexes, and what I recommend is that you put these indexes or indices is the correct word, you put them in the beginning of the manual, because what's going to happen is as you try to go back and look at this index every time, it's going to be very hard to flip all those pages. If you've got these in front of you, you'll see how thick they are. Flip it all the way back to the index can be a lot of work and time consuming. You know, if it gets you one more question that you answer because you didn't have to flip back and forth, that could be the deciding factor of whether or not you pass or fail. Believe me, a lot of people just get a little over a 70, and they're contractors too, by goodness. Anyway, so once again, you're going to get more information about these two manuals and how they relate to each other in another video where it talks about, I guess the name of the video is Florida Building Code Building versus Florida Building Code Residential, because these will be the two main code books that the code questions come out of. And it talks about the differences of the two and how they're organized and what have you. So I really suggest that you watch that video. It's the Florida Building Code Building is organized by the type of material, wood or steel or concrete. Florida Building Code Residential is organized by the building component. Talk about foundations, they talk about floors, they talk about walls, roofs, and so forth in that way. So it's that alone can kind of give you some insight as to how you're going to find information. Use those indexes. I'm a big fan of using indexes in any of these manuals. That's the first place I go in almost all of them, if they have one, if they have a good one. All right. Here's an exception to that rule: Florida Building Code Accessibility. All right, this is a federal document, so it is not in the same format as the Florida Building Code, the other codes. Okay, so we've adopted this accessibility. Well, you have to, right? It's a federal law, but there is no index. But there's a really, really good table of contents. You're just going to use that table of contents. It breaks it down just very small section by section in the table of contents. To know that you're going to go to this book, you're going to look for words like wheelchair, ramp, accessible, van lot, van parking lot, and those types of things. Okay. Once again, there's going to be minimums and maximums. Again, no index, but a great table of contents. All right. Now we're moving on to the Florida Building Code Energy Conservation versus the energy efficient building construction in Florida. I show you these together because I want to show you the differences of the two, because you're going to get a question, you're going to get a question about insulation, you're going to get a question about air infiltration, you're going to get a question about, your maybe ICF construction, wall construction, what's the best R value. You might get a question about, you buy an energy efficient product and what's your return on investment going to be. Well, what I want you to realize is, once again, Florida Building Code Energy Conservation is a book of rules. It's a law. It shall be this way. It must be this way. There's going to be some minimums and maximums and so forth like that. In the energy efficient building construction in Florida, I've come to call this a homeowner's guide. Somebody that was going to build their own home, this would be an awesome information book. Okay, it's going to talk about the different types of insulation and what the R value is for each one. It's going to tell you about the return on investment on an energy efficient product, whether or not it's worth buying it or not. It's going to tell you what SEER value means in air conditioning. It's got some tables. It's got great information in here. But this is general information. Energy efficient building construction in Florida. Good general information. Versus the code book is a book of rules where it's got to be that way. So hopefully that kind of give you an idea when you get that question. It's okay, it's energy efficiency. Which one do I go to? That'll help you out a little bit. Okay. Now, this Florida Building Code Energy Conservation and all of these books, you're going to get a video in this course, which is going to take you pretty much page by page through the manual. This particular one, I'll go ahead and give you a little preview. This is the one code book, and one of the only books that I know of that has two different sections with their own indexes. I'll go ahead and use the word indexes instead of indices, if that's okay with you. Um, there's an index for your commercial section, which is in the front. There's an index for the residential section, which is in the back. So if you're going to take these indexes out and put them in the front, just be aware of that. Okay? All right, very good. Let's move on to the OSHA, Code of Federal Regulations is what it's called. Um, and, on your list of manuals, we always call it just the OSHA manual. There are many different versions. If yours doesn't look like this, don't worry about it, okay? When we take you through this manual on the video, we talk about paragraph numbers, not page numbers. Why? Well, there's so many versions of this that if we told you what page number, you might be in the right manual, you may not be, but the paragraph numbers stay pretty much the same. So you'll be able to find the information as we guide you through this book, page by page. No need to have the latest version. Once again, it's obviously about safety. You're going to get these questions about scaffolding and the height of scaffolding and the safety equipment and the how much drinking water you're supposed to have in your first aid kit and your ladders, how far your ladders have to stick up above the upper platform and all these good things. And it's great because it's got a great index. So the first step is, okay, it sounds like a safety question. We're going to go to OSHA, we're going to go to the index, and it'll generally get you there. This is all about ladders, scaffolding, excavations, motor vehicles, electrical, general information, hearing protection. Oh man, you would not believe how many rules there are. Okay. Now, let's say you couldn't find what you needed in the index. Well, I want to direct you to the table of contents. I think it would be worth spending a few minutes looking through the table of contents because what you'll find is it's organized by topic. Subpart X is ladder, subpart L is scaffolding, subpart P is excavation, so, and so forth. So once you know that, you can say, okay, well, I couldn't find it in the index, but maybe this will help here. Okay, most of the time you're going to find it in the index, but there might be a couple that you don't. And remember, if you passed the business exam, or if you didn't pass it, if you took a class or read chapter 7 in the contractor's manual, remember, rope and rigging questions are going to come mostly out of chapter 7 in the contractor's manual, not out of the OSHA book. Just a little hint there. Okay. Building component safety information, what's called the truss book. All right, this is going to tell you about you're going to stack trusses on the ground. You got to block them up. How to lift the trusses, how to brace the trusses. That's the big deal right there. You got top cord bracing, you've got bottom cord bracing, you got diagonal bracing, you got permanent bracing, you have temporary bracing. It can be way complicated, and just about everybody I talk to say there's a lot of questions about this. And this is metal plates. There's these metal plates in these trusses. You probably already know that. But I did talk to somebody who said, "What are they talking about this metal plate thing?" Well, they're talking about the trusses. Okay, they're talking about because it says right there, it's the guide to good handling of metal plate connected wood trusses. So that's what they're talking about there. There's no index in this book, but so pay attention, pay close attention. Make sure you tab this book if you didn't purchase them tabbed already. Okay, principles and practice of commercial construction. Once again, you can bring this book in now, and that's great. They talk, it's a wide variety of stuff. Site layout, surveying equipment, excavations, piles, other type of equipment, earth moving equipment, concrete, steel, that it's just amazing what they go through in this manual right there. But it's got a great index. I'll tell you what I did the first time I took the exam. I was green as could be. I didn't know where I was going to go to find information from what manual. What did I do? I said, you know what? I've seen the index in this book, and that thing is jamming. All right, so I'll go to this book first, And if it's in this book, that index will tell me it's in there, and I'll go find it and answer the question. And then if not, well, I've eliminated this book and I can go look somewhere else. Anyway, so once again, it's allowed into the exam now. It's an awesome manual. Okay, Florida Building Code, existing building. It's about remodeling. You have different levels of remodeling depending on the percentage of the building that you're remodeling. They talk about the coastal construction setback line in this particular manual, but they also talk about it in the residential and building as well. It's got a good index, just like all the other code books do, except for the accessibility, remember. But you may not even get one question out of it. But if it's about remodeling, you know, there's a good chance, there is a possibility that that you will get a question out of it. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Okay, here we go. You hopefully are familiar with these. This is the Florida Contractors Manual. This happens to be the 2021 edition. If you have the 2017, I would be fairly comfortable using the 2017. There is 4 or 5 pieces of information that have changed a little bit from one manual to the other. So I would still be comfortable using the 2017 edition. The 2021, there was a little mix-up, and one version had an index, one version didn't have an index, one version had some tax tables, one version didn't have some tax tables, so they really kind of, you know, didn't do the greatest job on this 2021 edition. But it is a good manual. It takes you all the way through all the business portion of the Florida, you know, construction laws. Now, why are we using it for the trade portion? Because I think, like I mentioned before, contract administration is the first exam. Contract administration. It's about contracts. You know, you got to know the kind of things that's in the Florida Contractors Manual. It's going to be on that exam. You're going to know about lien law. You got to know about licensing. Are you licensed to do the work? You know, you got to know about workers' comp. You know, you got to know about the safety rules, and all that stuff is in there. Okay. You know, when I'm talking safety rules, chapter 7, not only rope and rigging, but you know, your paperwork involved with OSHA. You know, you got to keep your records. Where do you keep your records? What goes on your records? You know, and stuff like that. Okay. And you got to know all that for the contract administration exam. Okay. Oh, by the way, if your book does not have an index, make sure that you bring, you know, you have that separate index. You can bring the separate index in. Make sure it's bound. Everything's got to be bound. You can't take in loose papers. They can't be stapled. They have to be bound in some type of a binder, you know, so make sure that you do that. The 201, the 401, and the 701, I just have a picture of the 201 here. Those are very important as well. You should be familiar with those a little bit at this point. You're going to get some questions out of them. You know, it's going to happen. So be aware. Remember, the 201 has an index. The 701 and the 401 do not. All right. Once again, the contract administration is the first exam. Project management is the second exam. And you're going to use chapters 2 licensing, chapters 4 insurance, 5 labor law, 6 workers comp, 7 OSHA, 8 contracts, 9 lien law. You got to know lien law if you're going to administer a contract, and 10 project management and the AI documents. There you go. So that tells you a little bit about the manuals that you can bring in. Now here are the ones you can't bring in. All right, design and control of concrete mixtures. That's pretty self-explanatory. They're talking about slump tests, compression tests, time frames, mixture ratios, admixtures, and stuff like that. And I've got a list. Every single one of these books, I have a list of important concepts that I'm going to provide you as part of the course that I would like for you to try to remember and memorize as many of them as possible, because you can't bring these manuals in. What I would suggest you do is you print these up and you keep them with you. Stick them, you know, fold them up, stick it in your back pocket. You're waiting on an inspector, pull that joker out and start reading it. You know, you're waiting on, you know, whatever you're doing, you're waiting on the on the foursome in front of you. You know, they're kind of slow. Pull that thing out and do a little bit of reading about your future. All right. You've got the gypsum book, same thing. You've got placing reinforcement bars. You have the Walker's Building Estimators Manual. A lot about roofing. There's a term called orthographic projection that I want you to become familiar with. Estimating how many CMUs you're going to need. Another fancy word for concrete block. General contract information. There's lots of great information in these books. You can't take them in. All right, and once again, we talked about the Builder's Guide to Accounting. That page 24 percentage of completion formula is really the only one that you need to be aware of. um, there is a PDF of the manuals in the course in this course in section 5, which in the introduction to the reference manual. So there's a PDF that you can print out if you want to take it with you. And I would actually kind of suggest that, because you might get to a testing center where they're not aware of every book that you can bring in. It's not a bad idea to have that with you, because if they change, like they did with the principles and practices, and that particular testing center hasn't gotten the updated information, that could be an issue. Okay, remember your tabs. Your tabs have to be permanent. If you can take a tab off a page without ripping the page, you may end up having to take them all off before you take the exam. It happens more than you might think. All right, well, I want to say thank you for your business. I want to say you can call me anytime at 904-755-4111 for the 411. Remember to give back. You're going to be rich and famous by the time you get your contractor's license and do a few jobs. But there's going to be people that are less fortunate than you. So, give some money to your church, give some money to charity. And above all, don't let anybody tell you you don't know Jack. You do know Jack. You know Jack, the exam guy. Jack helped me pass this exam. I know Jack. Thank you so much for your business.